Hi, my name is Guadalupe Hirt. I am the co-founder of SecondActWomen. Welcome to our ongoing workshop development series, where we are talking to amazing second act experts about how to level up your game, both in corporate and entrepreneurship. And today it is my pleasure to welcome Lyndal Larkin with Leadership. She is a leadership and executive coach who is all about helping women and men, but particularly women, level up their game when it comes to job search. And in today's session, she is going to talk about one key point, in addition to many others, but the whole mental game that comes when we find ourselves struggling to find our next gig, on top of dealing with a pandemic. And so tune in today to learn some really awesome tips and ideas on how you can change your perspective and increase your odds for landing your next gig. So with that said, thank you so much for joining us today, Lyndal.
Thank you. So excited to be here. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, so it's really interesting because we've been having several conversations, Barbara and Lupe and I, about this time and about job hunting and the opportunities that are present here. And it's interesting because much of my focus when I work with corporate clients, both individual executives as well as the organizations themselves, is around employee engagement, is around their level of engagement and really being the best version of themselves. And ultimately, that begins with a successful job search and what we bring to those first few days on the job, the first few weeks and first few months. And so I'm really excited to be here and talk specifically about what tips and tricks you can take away that will really help you to be more effective in this process. And it absolutely begins with mindset. What I would like to do to begin, and this is, I love this size of group because it allows us to have some real conversations. So this is interactive. I would invite each of you to jump in as you have comments, as you have questions, to please, let's make this a group discussion. I know that Barbara and Lupe are absolutely going to be jumping in, and so we'll keep that going, and I'll try to make some pauses as we go throughout the slides as well. Before we do that, I want to just know, I want three things. I want, who are you? And I can see your name, but where are you calling from? Okay, how old are you? Right, and I'm 47, by the way. And then I also want to know, what is one word, the first word that comes to mind when you think about the job search? And Verona, I'm going to start with you because you're on my left. So, who are you? How old are you? Where are you calling from? And what's the first word?
Okay, Verona Matthews. I'm in Colorado, 40 years old. And I've joined today from 2 points of view. So firstly, just for these kind of things, you never know where you find yourself in next month, tomorrow. So there's that. And also the company that our company, we do mentor coaching for teens. And it's a small company and I wear many hats, and we've been doing so well because of COVID that we've had to really expand and get new coaches. I mean, so I joined today also just from the point of view that, if I can just get some insights, because I'm doing HR now and recruiting, and it's one of those things where, okay, we need more people. Let's see if I can do that. So I kind of need to upskill. But if I can just think about job search in general, for myself, I would say overwhelming. I remember when we just moved to the US, it was completely and utterly overwhelming. I didn't know if I was on the proper sites. I didn't know which keywords to put in. I wasn't sure if my skills matched what was, required. It was overwhelming. So job search, that's my word.
Yeah, thank you. Great to have you here. Joni, who are you?
I'm Joni Alvarez. I'm calling in from Chicago, actually downtown Chicago. And I'm 63 and just graduated and in the midst of the job search. And I agree with Verona. It's absolutely overwhelming. There's so many job sites to be checking, people to network with, and figuring out how to prioritize all of that and how to juggle emails and LinkedIn and networking and just time to upskill and figuring out what areas to upskill in. So I agree, it's overwhelming. And, you know, I'm glad we're meeting today because it's like, how do I cut through the clutter? So hoping to get some guidance on cutting through that clutter.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dina. Who are
Okay,
you?
I'm Dina. I am 57. Sorry. I'm living in Denver, Colorado, actually a suburb, Westminster, Colorado. And my one word is ugh. I mean, ugh. Really no other way to describe it.
I'm writing these down. Is that 2 G's?
I don't know.
Or 5? Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Elizabeth. I think you were muted.
Oh, she just disappeared.
I think she's trying to unmute.
Okay.
Okay.
Probably because she's on her phone, and Zoom is so crazy when
On
you're
the
on your
phone.
phone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what, Elizabeth, if it's easier, you can just type it into chat. And while you do that, I'm going to also highlight a few of the like other words that we've seen even in just communications on our Facebook. So outdated, unsure. We've also seen scared, and just frustrated. So those are some themes that we've also seen in our community as well too.
Absolutely.
You haven't seen ugh?
I'm sure
Put it on the
that's
list.
like surreptitiously interwoven into every comment that
Let's skip over to Claudine and we'll come back to you, Elizabeth, if you're able to unmute. Claudine, are you with us? I see that you're also muted. Oh, you're out.
Good morning. Yep.
Hi.
I'm here for about 25 minutes. Thank you for having me. I'm Claudine. I live in Denver. I'm 53, almost 54. And I'm catching on. You want one word for the job search or for
Yeah.
this
What's the
year?
first word that comes to mind when you think about the job search?
Overwhelming.
Yep. Thank you. Great to have you here.
She's my old high school friend.
I'm not old. We're class.
Oh yeah, my young
Former.
high school friend. Shame on me.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
We graduated together. We are not
Busted.
old.
Fun.
We're like
Love it.
fine wine.
That's right, baby.
Elizabeth, I think you're on now.
Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
I'm calling from Denver, Colorado. I'm 45, yay. And first word is just frustrating.
Mhm.
So
Got it.
thanks guys for the patience. Sorry about taking so long to figure out.
No worries. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got a couple of slides that we will use. And as we start to talk about this, I did a kind of back of the envelope calculation last night of how many interviews that I have conducted. And so my background, I've been in HR for over 18 years, and I started out in the learning and development world. I moved into recruiting. I did several generalist roles, and my last role was head of people at a local tech startup here in Los Angeles, where I am based. And then I moved into Larkin Leadership, my own coaching and consulting practice. And in my 18 years, my low ball estimate is over 3,000 interviews that I have conducted. And those are at all levels, from entry level to senior executive and CEO. And so today's tips and tricks are really based upon what I have seen, what I have experienced, and what I continue to see and experience with my current clients, both from a recruiting side as well as the experience of being the person that is job hunting as this audience is, and the real challenges that come up with that. So the key takeaways that I'm hoping will really help solidify for you today are around mindset, clarity of search. So we'll talk a little bit, and I think especially as so overwhelming, and I think there was a comment about so many different jobs out there and trying to network and look at all of the different sites. And I hope this exercise will help help narrow down that search and how to approach that and what the best format is for you. And then 5 prep practices that you can begin to implement immediately. And as I said, I don't want this to be me talking at you and going through all of the slides. So please jump in. And as you are raising hands, I can't always see that on my side because of the slides. So I'll ask Lupe and Barbara to help moderate that and jump in and interrupt me as you have questions or comments, okay? So a little bit about the mindset piece. There's 2 pieces I want to talk about. One is about what's happening externally. One is what's happening internally for us. When we think about external, I in no way want to minimize the impact that the pandemic has had on all of us. And in many ways, there are great similarities that we're experiencing, but in many ways, we're having very different experiences. By industry, by our own personal situations. And I want to acknowledge that. I also want to highlight that companies are absolutely hiring right now. What I am seeing in my network is that there are varying degrees of proactive hiring. There is a lot of networking happening at all levels because there is talent available right now that has not been available previously. There are organizations that have had to, as I think all of us know, that have had to reduce their workforce. But there's also organizations that have been, I think, very disappointing for their employees in terms of company culture and have maybe assumed that that it's easy to retain talent during this time. And I've seen actually just the opposite of that, of people becoming disenfranchised and saying, okay, it's time to look for something else. And my time is really precious and I want to make sure that I'm maximizing that. And I would invite you to not get sucked into sort of the challenging piece of that and the doom and gloom that we sometimes hear. A lot of times there are absolutely challenges. I was telling Lupe just before we got on, there was a Fortune and Deloitte survey of CEOs that took place in October, and 47% of CEOs said that they expect their revenues to be back to fully recovered, was the classification, by January 2021. And that seems high. I will admit that seems really high. And I know that varies by industry dramatically. But by mid-year, over 60% of those same CEOs said that they expect a full recovery. And I think that whether that is overly optimistic or not, I do think that that's an incredible sign of what is happening in the market and where the energy and the direction is intending to go. I'm also here in Los Angeles. I get several emails about jobs so that I'm continuing to stay networked and understand what is out in the market. And there is a particular recruiting firm that sends a weekly update of job postings. And just for HR jobs, director level and above, so these are director, VP, SVP, CHRO, in a 20-mile radius from my home in West LA, there were 16 jobs posted last week alone. And those have been fairly consistent throughout the last couple of months, actually, that I have been seeing a steady double-digit number of jobs that are posted each week. And this, again, varies by region and by position and industry, but there are jobs out there. And I just want to encourage that piece of that. I want to pause there for any comments or questions on that as well.
Now, I think it's so interesting because we only hear of people really losing their jobs, and, you know, and like I said, and I hate to phrase it like this, but because of COVID, and we do mentoring specifically for teenagers, we've done really well, and that's why we are now looking to recruit more. And it's we don't hear of people getting new jobs during this time at all. So it was very interesting to hear your take on that. It really was.
Mm-hmm. And I think your story is really inspirational of how many, the growth that you're seeing and the positive shift. And I think we're absolutely, we can get very easily into that spiral and only see the negative and feel very much as if we're out of touch or there aren't the same opportunities. Claudine, I'm seeing your hand is raised.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. So when I read companies are seeking top talent, I understand what that means. And it is, I guess, scary or daunting to me because it's time for me to change industries or possibly go back into a previous industry that I've been involved in. But I don't feel that I'm at my top, or I don't feel that I am a top talent person industry wise. That doesn't mean that I'm not confident in my abilities, but I have to be able to express that to any company, any industry that I'm choosing to look into.
I have a response, Barbara. I'd like, you and I were talking a little bit about the confidence piece. Can I ask you to step in for a second and share your perspective on this?
Oh, are you talking to me?
I am.
When
we were just talking.
Yes, I was saying earlier. So Megan Jo Specht is a recruiter for Amazon, and she has been in the recruiting industry really since she was a baby because her mom was also in it, has her own agency. So what she was saying in one of our other, when we were speaking to the women of a global company weeks back, is that she oftentimes, when it comes to our specific age demographic, we show up not showing our confidence. We show up so lacking confidence. We show up a little bit desperate, even though you don't recognize that you're coming off as desperate because because you need the job. They, as experts, can feel that through the Zoom call or in an in-person meeting. And so she was saying that oftentimes we just need to show up with our personal brand statement, if we have one, and be with it and excited and enthused. No matter how many interviews you've gone through, you need to shift your mindset, as we're speaking about mindset, and really come in as the authoritative thought leader in that, an expert in whatever field you're applying for. And Lupe, do you have any other things that you can say to that?
No, I mean, I think it just comes down to, I'm really excited about the mindset in this one, because I think for a lot of our women too, yes, there are external factors, and yes, I think ageism is obviously very prevalent, but by the same tone, I think there are still opportunities to be had. And I love, Lyndal, that you shared that there are still jobs out there. So I think it becomes a 50-50, or I'm curious to see how that percentage pans out as we go through your presentation.
And Claudine, I think your perspective is really natural. And I hope that some of the exercises that we actually talk about today will help you find how to position that, because if you are not believing you're top talent, it's very hard to convince someone else that you are. And I would suggest that you probably are. I also, and finding that way to position it where it feels really authentic for you. And it does showcase the skills and capabilities that you are bringing to the table that are unique to you, and that combination, whether it's in that industry or a variety of different industries. The one thing I will say also, and I think we've all heard this statistic over the year, and there's a couple different variations on the numbers, but in general, they say that women will apply for a job when they have 90% plus of the job criteria listed. Men will apply when they have 20 to 30% of the criteria. That we tend to.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Can
I tell you, that was another thing that Megan Jo had mentioned as well as a recruiter, is that same stat. And so their odds of getting a job because of that are greater. If you really
because
think
they're
about
applying
it.
more. They're applying more. So
yes, they're applying
quantity.
more.
There's quantity.
Right. So the stock ratio of getting a job are higher. So we need to go in and Lyndal, I'll be interested to see what you say is what percentage should we be at? If there's a job description and we own at least 80% or even 50% of those skills, I would go for it. But that's me and my alpha.
So,
sorry.
I'm sorry, because I'm going to need to leave in about 5 minutes. I saw this late this morning as far as being here, and I want to be here, but are you guys recording it that I could access the information afterwards?
Yeah, it'll be up on in the Insider's dashboard by tomorrow at the latest.
Okay, awesome. I really appreciate this, and I am very interested to hear the rest of the tips. And And I want to say just before I go, what I'm asking or what I'm looking for is to be able to reframe what I know that I am confident about. And I understand, Barbara, about walking in to any interview as the expert, or that I am good in that field, but I need.
I think you just muted.
Oh, we just, right when you said I need, Claudine, we didn't hear the rest.
I
think it was her connection. It sounds like it was her connection.
I'm sorry.
Claudine.
Did you hear any of that?
It ended with I need. So just complete that.
I need practical, tactical ways to reframe my experiences and my confidence that I have gained over my 30 plus years of working, to transition that into a resume and also into an interview to display my confidence. It's not that I'm not confident, it's that I need the practical tools to turn the confidence and express the confidence.
To translate that, yep.
Express the confidence. So
Claudine, I would suggest definitely, if you've got the opportunity to watch the rest of the video, take a look at the slides, but I also invite you to reach out directly to me, and I'm happy to review some of that a little bit more specifically, because I suspect you might have some questions or comments out of that. So I'm happy to schedule some time to chat a little bit more about that one-on-one.
Too. Okay. That's a very good question.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm glad you were able to join for part of it.
Grab my other call. I appreciate it, ladies.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
I have a quick question. When you talk about that men apply for things that they're only 30% able or capable or have experience in doing, maybe it's a better way to say, you know, when you see something, a job posted, and it's like must have 4 years experience in, and it's all this technical stuff. Would someone apply to that? I mean, you can do all the 16 other things on there, but you don't have the experience in whatever the technical aspect is, or you don't, have the product information. Is that something they would still apply for that we should?
Often is, yes, I can, on the receiving end of so many resumes, thousands and thousands, 100%, yes. And I'm not suggesting that you should go blindly apply for every possible job and say, wow, that title looks amazing. I have none of the criteria. Let me go ahead and apply. That's not the message. But when you are looking at a job posting and saying, gosh, I could do this. I have done this. And yes, okay, I have 2 years experience. It's asking for 4. I have, I don't have it's saying preferred master's degree, and I don't have a master's degree. Those types of things, absolutely applying for that. When it's saying very specific experience and you're familiar with that and you feel that you understand what that means, then again, absolutely apply. It's hard to say a hard and fast percentage, but as Barbara is referencing, 50% is a general good rule of thumb to say, if I've got 50% of what is on this job description of what they're asking for requirements, then I should be applying, and let them decline you. Know that you may get declined more by that, and there's a little ego check sometimes there to be okay with that. And generally, the more senior roles that we are applying for, the more rejection that occurs, and that's a natural process. So it's also just recognizing that piece of it. So as we talk about, and that leads in perfectly to the internal piece, is that we've got to recognize for ourselves where there's the opportunity to shift that. Noticing and every time I've done a workshop like this, when we talk about the first word, it is incredibly rare to have any positive words, right? I rarely hear people say, I am engaged, I'm thrilled, job hunting just makes me tingle, I love it. And I would just invite you to notice that about yourself. It's not about changing that, but recognizing how does that mindset of the ugh, of the overwhelm, which was overwhelmingly the word that people were using to describe it on this call today, how does that influence and inform the way that you're approaching the job hunt. If I'm walking into this in the morning and sitting down at my computer and saying, ugh, oh, this is overwhelming. Oh, this is so hard. I'm already bringing a mindset that is heavy and hard and stressed around this experience. The attitude piece, the Asian Leadership describes it as Asian Leadership Institute, describes it as vibrational communication. So it talks about what approach are we bringing to a situation? Are we expanded? Are we considering the possibility? And again, this isn't about being inauthentic, but it is about having the mindfulness piece to recognize where are we coming into this experience? And that starts with the job search. It starts with applying for the job, and it absolutely leads into the interview experience as well. And the final piece around the internal mindset, and I look forward to hearing Claudine hear this and maybe talking with her a little bit more, is recognizing the value of your own unique capabilities and experiences. And one of my favorite examples, and I drew this out this morning, as I said, I've been in the HR world for 18 plus years. Prior to that, I was a tour guide in the Canadian Rockies. I worked aboard cruise ships. I co-owned and operated a restaurant. I was a meeting planner. I was a concierge in a hotel. And those pieces generally are not on my resume if I am looking for an HR related job, because they're not relevant and they're 20 years ago. However, the skills that I gained from those, the experiences that I had, and the capabilities that came out of that are absolutely relevant to the job that I am applying for, and they help create that unique superpower. We'll talk a little bit about, in this next couple of slides, we'll talk a little bit more about how do you craft that story, but I want to invite you to even think about what are all of the different experiences and skill sets that you have gleaned from your entire experience. And that goes back when I was in college. I was doing volunteer work that was around learning and development and training people. And when I think of that and the skills that I got out of that, they absolutely inform how I behave today. And so there's a couple of different exercises that you can do here. The one that's my favorite is actually doing a very simple mind map. And I drew this out as an example, and it's hand drawn to show how easy it is. But I put cruise ship purser and I put hotel concierge here. And from there, I started drawing and connecting some of the very simple, basic capabilities that I learned from each of those. I would suggest that you begin with an exercise like this to simply get a bearing of what the various skill sets and capabilities are that you have gleaned from all different aspects of your life. And this may be from parenthood. This may be through volunteership. It may be through your church, your mosque, your synagogue, a variety of different areas in which you are experiencing different skill development. Thoughts and comments on this? I think there's one hand up. Nope. Okay. We're going to keep going to clarity of search. So we'll come back to this exercise in the mind map, and it may be simply listing out for you, but getting really clear of where are those unique skills and knowledge pieces that are different than what someone else brings to the table. There isn't a right combination, but it's these different components that really create your superpower. When we talk about the clarity of search, it's interesting to me because so many people, I believe, are often so concerned if an employer wants them that they forget that this interview process goes both ways, that I'm actually determining as the interviewee if this is the right fit for me, if this is the right organization that I actually want to be at and contribute and spend time. And so this exercise around clarity of search has a couple of components. One is identifying the most important criteria of a new role. And it's determining, and I'll walk you through a little example of this. And it's determining the top priorities in each category. And then finally determining if those priorities, are they a wish or are they a deal breaker? Here's what that might look like. So the categories in this chart, you could fill them in as absolutely anything. These are simply examples. So business and industry, boss, colleagues, direct reports, development opportunities, promotional opportunities, level of creativity and innovation. You could continue on. You may only have 3 or 4 that are really important to you. What I would suggest in an exercise like this is then to list under each of those categories every single thing that's important to you. And it may be a wish list, What are those things that are really important? I want to make sure that there are promotional opportunities. I want to make sure that I'm able to be developed, that the organization has a solid development plan. It might be around the business itself, that I want it to be stable. I'm looking for a company that's well established, that has positive revenue and is continuing to grow and has continued to be successful in this past 24 months and is looking to be continuing on that path for the next 24 to 36 months, et cetera. There's no right answer to this, but it's beginning to identify what is most important to you. From there, and we're not going to take every single thing and say, okay, this is my unicorn and I'm looking for all of these things within the job search, but maybe picking those top one or two in each of those criteria that are most important. What are the priorities? What do you know to be true? And I'll give you an example. One of my clients actually just declined a job because it was with a movie studio. It sounded absolutely fantastic until she got through the interview process a little ways and found out that it was essentially a 24/7 type role. And they said, you will, we're on set. And so this is, and she was providing remote support, but they said, we're going to need, and anticipate you'll get calls at midnight. You'll get calls on weekends. We will need you in the evenings, 5 a.m. in the morning, and we expect your phone to be on 24/7. This client has 2 little kids and said, I need to carve out some boundaries for me, and this is not the right role for me. And it was really hard for her to decline it, but it was having the clarity around what was most important, and for her, what was the deal breaker. So the other piece of this is that it's identifying for you, are these wishes? Are they desires to say, great, in my ideal situation, there would be incredible promotional opportunities. There would be development opportunities. There'd be an established leadership training program at this organization. Or is it a deal breaker in which you're unwilling to proceed in a job search or in an interview if that is or is not present for you? And there's no right answer. As we've talked about, and we had a couple of comments about the challenges of this economy right now. I don't want to minimize that, and you need to decide what is right for you. But without having that information and that clarity, there is no opportunity to make that clear decision and know where you are making choices to accept a role that may or may not have a long-term wish or deal breaker that's present for you. I'll pause there for comments and questions.
No, I love this exercise because I think it would help distill. Sometimes we get in our head and we don't see everything until it's written out. I'm one of those, I'm like, oh, and then we could do this. And then all of a sudden Barb's like, well, did you write a plan? I'm like, well, no. And then once you start writing the plan, you're like, holy snap, there's a whole bunch to it. So I think in this case, it gives you a good snapshot of like, hey, here's my deal breakers. Here's what I don't. I mean, I would even add like money, like what's my salary? What's my, desired outcomes for all of that stuff. Because I think once it's visually written out, you can see, does this make sense for me to do or not?
Absolutely. And this isn't for anyone else to see. This is for you. So there may be wish list things on there of, I want to, when we go back to the office, I want to have flexibility that I can still work remote at least 2 days a week. I need a commute to be within X miles of my home. I want it to be casual. I want to be able to wear jeans to work when I do go into the office. You may not choose to take or not take a job based upon that, but to know that that's important to you is the first piece of that. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on? I see a couple nodding heads. Okay. So
I have one.
Yeah, Barbara.
Is that a takeaway that they could use this piece? Do you have a spreadsheet or a worksheet that they could use?
Sure, absolutely.
That would be great to link to it and have them use this as a homework. And literally, ladies, say to yourselves, because I'm a deadline girl, not that I always meet them, Dr. Lupe, but I do like to try to set deadlines, right? So, say to yourself too, that you're going to have this piece done by December 30th, or whatever it may be. And
Barbara, you are leading. Barbara, you're putting, so at the very end, I'm going to ask, and here's the little seed to be planted right now. I'm going to ask, you're perfect. This is perfect timing. I'm going to ask everyone to commit to something by December 31st. So this might be your thing. Okay? Perfect. We're so on the same. Okay, so as we talk about some key interview prep practices, I want to go through, and there's 5 keys here, and I'm going to go somewhat quickly through these, but I will invite some questions and comments at the end. If there's something that's a burning question or comment, please jump in. First one is crafting your story to demonstrate your own unique superpower. So we did the exercise, the mind map, the listing out of what these unique capabilities are. I will tell you, when I am interviewing a times I will ask something around, tell me a little bit about yourself. That is probably the most common question that I have received as a candidate. And my challenge with that oftentimes is when someone simply regurgitates, read your resume. I understand. And oftentimes we'll get this sort of, oh, tell me about myself. Okay, well, I went to college here and then I started here and then I did this. And you get this recounting of exactly what's on the piece of paper. When someone asks you this question, or there is any opportunity, and we'll talk a little bit about that because oftentimes you may not be asked that exact question, but there are absolutely opportunities to weave your story into everything that you're talking about in an interview. Having that prepared, and we call it spontaneous preparation, right? Because I have it prepared. It may or may not come up, but I've got all of these little pieces that I am certain that I want to try to weave in wherever I can. And I'm going to be as mindful as I can to bring those up throughout the conversation. But without that preparation, oftentimes we'll end an interview or some sort of conversation, and it may just be an informational interview, but we end that going, oh, I should have shared this. Oh, I could have said this. I didn't even think to bring that up. So this is around being spontaneously prepared. You're going to be asked the questions in an interview, so you're not driving that, but you want to make sure that you are fully ready and prepared to answer any of those. So when we think about the crafting the story, I'll give you an example of the first 2 minutes of what my story is. So as I mentioned, I had a travel and tourism background before I moved into HR. And that's not typically on my resume because it's not HR related. And it's something that's so long ago that it often doesn't come up as part of my conversation or examples of accomplishments when I'm being interviewed. However, there are pieces of that I have been told regularly have led me to getting the job. That there are components of the travel and tourism, of operational experience that are outside of HR that have been components that they went, oh, this is really great because you actually have managed people and you've been in an operation and you've worked in a 24/7 business and you understand what that is like. You're not coming at it strictly from the HR perspective. And so that has been a benefit for me. Through the years, I have learned to craft a story in which I feel it highlights some of my competencies that I gained very early on in my career, but it also helps shape the transition in the story. So what that would look like and I'll just give you the first 2 minutes, is when someone asks, tell me a little bit about yourself. Or tell me about your career, or tell me, what should I've had people say, what should I know about you? Right. So I've had three pivots in my career. I actually started out wanting to be a commercial airline pilot. So when I was 16 years old, I started flying. I got my private license and I went to college with the intent to continue down the path of being a commercial pilot. After spending a lot of summers flying, I decided to take a break and I applied for and received a job in the Canadian Rockies as a tour guide. So I led 14-day bus tours through the Canadian Rockies. It was an incredible experience and it led me to realize that I am far more extroverted than what is probably safe or legal to do in an airplane cockpit. And so I shifted my flying into the hobby category and I began to pursue a career in travel and tourism. That was pivot number 1. From there, I did all things under the umbrella of travel and tourism. I went and worked on a cruise ship. I came back and worked in hotel operations, both on the food and beverage as well as the rooms division side. I did meeting planning. I co-owned and operated a restaurant. And in my first management job with Fairmont Hotels and Resorts, I was scheduled to, and I was still in operations, but I was scheduled to attend a corporate leadership development program that was part of the new manager training. And I went to this 8-hour program, and a gentleman by the name of Justin Young was the learning and development manager who facilitated the program. And I had never heard of HR. I didn't know anything about learning and development or the training world. And at the end of that 8-hour session, I went up to Justin and I said, I need to know what you do because I think I want to do this. this is my path. Like this combines my extroverted nature, my speech communication major that I had in college. It's still in hotels, and it's still around tourism and travel and providing exceptional customer service and being able to impact many individuals from an internal perspective. And my next pivot was when I took his role. He informally mentored me for about 3 months. And then when he moved to his next step, I ended up ultimately taking his role. And that was the move into the HR world that really was a cornerstone for continuing to build my career under the HR function. So that's an example of crafting that story. Any of those things you would not see on my resume. The first thing you'd see on my resume was the learning and development position. But I feel that ability to share and to craft and weave a story together that could have sounded very disparate, right? Well, I did this, and then I did this, and then I jumped over here and did this, and then I did this, may sound very different if you were looking at it on a piece of paper, or I was just listing it off in sequential order. But by being able to craft that story, it's able to connect with my superpower, which is really around affecting change in people, helping people to live their biggest, best version of themselves. And that has been a common theme throughout every position that I've ever had.
Quick question for you. Is that the kind of story you would put into the about on LinkedIn?
It's a great question. You could, the about typically is the recommendations, and I've worked with a couple of organizations that have had presentations from LinkedIn, and they say that should be no more than 2 paragraphs max. And so if you can craft that story into it, but my experience is that people are generally not reading essays in that. They're really looking for a quick synopsis that is highlighting your skill set and where your passion is and where your focus is, but in a very succinct way. So there may be components of that, but I wouldn't elaborate at that level of detail.
And I would use bullets. Exactly what she said in those summaries. I would use at least 3 to 5 bullets, so they get that information very quickly, and also encompass their personal brand your personal brand statement.
Yeah, love it.
But also the story that you shared is not, it has to be told as opposed to read, I feel. Because this is when you have the opportunity to, because you've weaved in your experiences very nicely, but also you got to see into your personality, the type of person that you are, and that is what people are looking for when they say, tell me about yourself. That you can't, it doesn't really come across on a LinkedIn profile per se. So there's aspects of what you said that absolutely can be used in the about section. Again, in the about section, I don't want to hear about your volunteering in college if it was, a little bit longer ago than that. But I get it. It brings emotion into it, and it's a different way of answering when people say, tell me about yourself, and just rattling off your resume. So yeah, I love it. I really do, Linda.
Thank you.
And Lyndal, so for the purpose of kind of just making sure we get through everything, we've got just a little over 13 left. So maybe let's hold our questions until the end, and then we can kind of address, because I'd love for these ladies to walk away with all of this information that we're going to.
I think that's a great point. We'll wait until, so I'll go through these 5 steps, and then we'll pause for questions at the end of that. Awesome. So customizing your approach to your audience. This hit home for me when I moved out of the corporate world. So I was working for Four Seasons Hotels. I was working for LVMH, luxury travel retailer, DFS. And in that, we were suited and booted. I had to wear hosiery every day. I wore, closed toe, closed heel shoes. Earrings had to be the size of quarters. It was a very strict grooming policy. And so when I moved into the startup world, it was very interesting because people were wearing sneakers and tennis shoes and jeans and hoodies. And so my very first interview that I had with the startup, the recruiter called me the night before the interview. And my name is Lyndal Larkin, and he calls me LL. And he said, LL, I just want to remind you, you're going into a startup tomorrow. I want to make sure you tone down the polish. So I don't even know what that means. Like, should I swear? Like, should I, I don't, what does that mean? He said, well, first off, don't wear pantyhose. Like those things, you can't do that. And don't wear a dress, like wear jeans. And I was horrified. I had never thought to wear jeans to an interview. I was fully ready. My suit was hanging. I knew I was going to wear pearls and all of these components that would have been absolutely appropriate in the luxury retail sector. And it was a great awakening for me, because I didn't go in as who I was not, but it was about knowing my audience. And I wore jeans to the interview. Ultimately, I ended up getting the role. I think it was because of my competency, not because of my jeans, but I think that opened the door. And what I would say here is there's two components, right? Customizing your approach. The general rule of thumb is that you want to dress one degree higher than what you would if you were in the organization. So by all means, if you are going into an interview with a tech startup and everyone's wearing hoodies and Converse and jeans, I am not suggesting that you should be dressing exactly that way. I'm also suggesting that a three-piece suit or a full dress and heels and pearls is probably not going to convey the message that you are going to be a fit for this organization. And so it's doing a bit of research around the vibe of the culture of the organization. And this is a little bit different, of course, in Zoom interviews, because you're only dealing with the waist up, but it also means that you're probably not wearing a full suit jacket and collared shirt when you're interviewing in a very casual environment. You're also not wearing the hoodie. Now, that said, from the approach, and I made the joke about, should I swear in the interview? And I absolutely did not, and I would never advocate that. But it also became figuring out and seeing from a lot of experience where that formality is still really valuable from an interview perspective. So something like a thank you note. I actually had my CEO in one of the organizations that I work receive a text from a fairly senior candidate that was interviewing for a fairly senior role. And the text said, "Great to meet you." And it was GR8, the number 8, and then the number 2, meet you, and just the letter U, as a thank you for the interview. And the CEO came into my office holding his cell phone and said, I can't. I need a formal thank you. Is that wrong? And so there's that piece of recognizing where that formality, always bringing a copy of your resume, for example, if you are going to an in-person interview, even though everyone has it electronically, I'm always an advocate, and I have been asked on multiple occasions if I have a copy. So printing off a copy. And for those of you that remember printing it on the watermarked paper and getting it even in a word processor and having it, this perfect piece of paper is not necessarily the priority at this point in the way that interviews are occurring. But if you are doing an in-person interview, bringing a copy, writing a thank you note, still following those guidelines of sort of more formal communication is always going to be appropriate. And I would always err on the side of more formal, but it is also understanding your audience and what that dynamic looks like. They're offering you coffee. They offer you water. Absolutely accept that. Indicate that you are casual and comfortable and relaxed enough to enjoy a cup of coffee with the person that is interviewing you, as opposed to what might have been very formal interview protocol that came out 20 years ago or 15 years ago. So researching the company, what I was sharing a challenge and pet peeve of mine is when people are not really maximizing the interview time. This is the chance to showcase you. So when someone comes into an interview and is asking questions that they could find out online, what kind of business is this? How big are you? When did you start? What do you sell? And this happens regularly for me when I'm on the interviewing side. These are pieces of information that you can easily glean off of the internet in 99% of the types of businesses. And so it's important to do your research and understand, look up the interviewer or interviewers on LinkedIn. Are there commonalities? Maybe you went to a similar school. Maybe you went to the same school. Maybe you know someone in common. Anything that's going to continue to bridge that connection and create some familiarity and connectivity is always going to be a positive. The other piece is on the technology. And in an article I was recently reading, they were saying that technology in the last 6 months has accelerated to the point that it would normally, what's happened in 6 months would happen in 6 years for organizations. So the technology that they have implemented, everyone's using Slack, for example. Everybody uses Zoom. There's a variety of different tools and G Suite and all of the different things. And you may not know specifically what the organization is using, but knowing the type of business it is and being able to do some general research and ensure that you're familiar with these terms and with any of the key components. If they're telling you that you need to be proficient on Slack as one of those job criteria or proficient on G Suite, that is something that you can easily do online with your own research prior to engaging in an interview and through the job application process. That's not a reason to not apply for the role. Can you hear me okay still, Lipe? Preparing data-driven answers and examples for anticipated questions. And so for this, and I know we're wrapping up here, but the one thing I would say here is ensuring that you've got the data to back up whatever answer and the example to back up whatever answer and successes you are most proud of. You're coming into an interview and you're telling me as an interviewer that your revenues doubled over the course of 2 years. I want to know what you did, how you did it, and what sort of timeline that was occurring. I've had people that have told me in HR interviews that they reduced their turnover significantly. Great, what percentage? And they can't answer that. And that says to me that either it didn't happen or they were so removed from that process that they're not able to and don't have access to that information. And so that becomes a problem because it's taking something that you would otherwise showcase and it's knocking it down a few pegs to suggest that you don't actually have the data to support that. So coming up with clear examples. What are you, when you think of those superpowers, when you think about the things that you do best, those 3 to 5 superpowers that you want to be able to articulate and share within an interview, what are examples of that? And where is the data to back that up? And finally, preparing questions for the interviewer. And the general rule of thumb is 2 questions, right? And you may have more in your back pocket that if time permits and the opportunity permits, you're able to keep. I've had candidates that actually stop me multiple times throughout the interview to say, I've got a question, I've got something. And my rule of thumb and my recommendation is to let the 99 times out of 100, there will be an opportunity that they will say, do you have any questions? I think, Lupe, you're telling me I'm maybe still hard to hear?
Yeah, you came back. Yeah, you were
okay.
There, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, oftentimes the interviewer, more often than not, the interviewer will offer an opportunity for questions at the very end. And it is always advantageous to have at least 1 or 2 questions. And really thinking about these questions. Again, it's not about the information that you can gather on the internet. It may be things that lead back to that worksheet and what is most important to you. Tell me a little bit about your culture. Tell me about the onboarding process that I would experience. What are the development opportunities? What are the promotional opportunities? What do you think my greatest challenge would be here in the organization? What do you anticipate would be my greatest priority over the first 60 days, 90 days, 180 days? How would you describe your leadership style? Are all questions that will help you to understand the culture and the organization that you are seeking to join. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a quick minute before we go on to our final slide. Questions, comments? Got some nodding heads. Okay.
It looks like we're good. Yeah.
Okay, so what I would like to challenge. Oh, sorry, I think someone might be trying to speak.
I have one question. Have you ever known any interviewer not to ask the person at the end of the interview, oh, do you have any questions?
I have. I have, absolutely. Yes. And that may be there's a couple of factors. I would say if the one interviewer is not asking that may be a skill gap or a time issue on the part of that interviewer. If you're going through an entire interview process with 5 different interviewers and no one is asking for questions, I personally would suggest that's an opportunity. Could be a little bit of a flag. It could be an opportunity to reach out to the person that is coordinating the interviews to say, I've actually got some questions. When would be a good good time to review those. Can I review those with you? And being able to ensure that you're getting the information that you need to make a full, competent decision.
Okay, great, thank you.
So what I'd like you to do is in the chat, in the comments, it's one thing that you are going to commit to doing, one action before December 31st. And it might be a mindset shift. It might be revisiting your word. It might be thinking about your superpower, doing a bit of a mind map around all of the experiences and capabilities, skills, and knowledge that you have. It may be the worksheet to really identify and clarify your search and what's most important to you, what the deal breakers are versus the wish list. It may be preparing some questions. It may be doing research if you have an actual interview that's already scheduled. But I'll invite you to, as we're going for the next couple of minutes, to plug it into the chat. I see lots of stuff. Thank you. In the interest of time, I would invite you to go ahead and put the questions into the chat. I am going to keep going to one more slide after this, and then I will stay on the line for a few minutes if anyone has questions and you're able to stay as well. I'll also provide my email address, and you're welcome to reach out directly to me. This is one of my favorite quotes around change. Plunge into it, move with it, and dance. Of insider opportunities. If you are interested in having a complimentary 45-minute resume audit session, there are two options. You can certainly put your email into the chat and indicate that for me, or you can email me directly at lyndal@larkinleadership.com and simply indicate the subject line, Second Act Insider Comp Coaching Session, and your current title, your current role, obviously your name and your contact information, and what objective you're seeking to get out of it. And I will be reaching out before end of day Friday to confirm the winners for this. And we'll do a first come, first serve. And then secondly, wanted to share that Larkin Leadership is now accepting applications for our female mastermind. So we are launching a mastermind for emerging female executives. And the definition of emerging is 2 to 3 years in an executive role or less, or in a new industry or new type of position. And so this is a different definition for many different individuals, but this is really about continuing to develop the capabilities of females in particular through a collaborative, diverse, supportive group of other females. It will be a group of 10 to 12, and we will do a 90-day mastermind. And so if this is of interest and you'd like more information, I invite you to reach out and we'll talk a little bit further about it. And then finally, if you're seeking more job search tips and tricks, I will certainly send the Clarity Search workshop to Lupe and Barbara, and so they can go ahead and post that with the slides. But if you're wanting more tips and tricks, or you have any questions about this, as I said, I'll stay on the line, but you're also welcome to put those into the chat box or to email me directly at lyndal@larkinleadership.
Wonderful.
And I want to just take a sec to thank Lupe and Barbara for this opportunity. Love Second Actors and love the energy and the passion that you bring to it. And it's contagious. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this as well.
Oh, well, thank you. We greatly appreciate all the insight that you brought. Ladies, we hope you walked away with some really just valuable nuggets of information. I think particularly for me, in hearing where we started and where we're ending now is hopefully that mindset about how you show up, how you see your skills, how you see your expertise. Don't diminish that.